Our first speaker, Marc Quinn, is one of the most famous artists in the world. He came to prominence in the 1990s as one of the original YBAs, and whose most iconic work from that period is perhaps his original bloodhead, Self. Self was a self-portrait of the artist, but one that literally used his body as material, since the cast of Quinn's head, immersed in frozen silicon, was created from 10 pints of his own blood. In this way, the materiality of the sculpture had both a symbolic and a real function. The work was made at a time when Quinn was an alcoholic, and the notion of dependency, of things needing to be plugged in or connected to something to survive, was apparent, since the work needed electricity to retain its frozen appearance. His latest work also incorporates the use of blood, but this time other people's blood. Our Blood, which is what the project is called, is a collaborative sculpture made by the artist along with more than 5,000 people, half of whom are refugees and the other half non-refugees. It's a monument to our common humanity, emphasizing that there is more that unites us than divides us. The sculpture, consisting of 2 enormous identical cubes of human frozen blood, will be unveiled outside the New York City Library next year, displayed in bespoke refrigeration units and housed in a pavilion designed by the renowned architect Norman Foster. Now, before we ask Marc to join us, I believe we have a short video. Please welcome to stage Marc Quinn.
Hi, Darren.
Hi, Marc. Welcome.
Thanks.
Firstly, how did this idea come about? It's an extraordinary project, but what was the initial idea? Where did it come from?
It's a kind of combination of... I like to make things about the world and about the world we live in, and not just about art in a sense. I want to bring the real world into art. And in 2015, I was seeing all these images of the Syrian refugee crisis and people coming across on boats and all this kind of thing. I'm thinking this is a really important, perhaps one of the defining issues of our day, and I want to make an artwork about it. But I couldn't think at the beginning of what to do. And also at the back of my mind, I've been thinking I wanted to make another artwork for like 25 years with blood, but with like a collaboration with tons of people. But again, I never thought of a subject that was strong enough or felt universally human enough to do that. So somehow on a flight from Beijing to London, these things kind of went like that. And I just thought, I'll just get, half the people refugees, half not, and I'll just make a single cube of blood with everyone's blood mixed together. And it's this kind of sense of our common humanity. And then that developed further into being 2, which I felt was like stronger, because then it's like you can't tell the difference. They're like 2 people standing together in solidarity. And that was the initial idea. And then, of course, I felt like perhaps I should speak to some refugees about this idea before I go any further, because it might not work. They might feel it doesn't work for them.
Did it start from a sense of outrage?
Yeah, a sense of outrage, a sense of wanting to... I think that art's like the cultural memory of the world, and I think it's important to bring real things into art. We remember Guernica because of Picasso's painting, not because we read books about Spanish history. So I think that there's an amazing responsibility as an artist that you can somehow remember the times you live in and make something that lasts forever in the cultural imagination of the world.
But you say this, and that's true, and in something like Guernica is obviously an extraordinary painting. But in the last 50 or so years, the expectation is that an issue like this would have been somehow co-opted by popular culture, by the entertainment industry. You think of Live Aid, you think of Free Nelson Mandela, etc., etc. So
well, that's what I was
why is it
brought
your
up
job?
Because I think that art is much more like that. It's part of the mainstream culture. I think it's moved. I think what's happened in the last 20 years is fine art, if you want to call it that, has moved out from being something that's rarefied and on its own and for an elite, and has become part of our collective culture. And I think that's amazing, and that gives the sense of opportunity and responsibility to do these kind of things.
In a world awash with social media, is it easier or more difficult for an artist to make a grand gesture?
I think you have to work with the world we live in, and I think that what art has that a lot of talking and discussions don't have is you have this immediate visceral hit, and especially art in the public realm. So when I realized this when I did the Alison Lapper sculpture that was in Trafalgar Square in 2005, it was a sculpture of a pregnant disabled artist friend of mine, and suddenly that changed the debate about disability in a way that a million petitions and conferences couldn't. And it was in the public realm, and everyone was like, oh, you can't put difficult things in the public realm because people won't understand it. And of course...
difficult things.
What happens is that ordinary people who know nothing about art have very strong opinions, have debate, and of the same quality as anyone else. So it's really about democratizing access to important art, as well as using the public realm to be what it should be, an area for debate. You know, that's what it traditionally was, the Roman Forum or whatever. It's somewhere where society can debate things that are happening within it. And we do have people go on marches and this kind of stuff. But in public art work, it can often not be that.
What do you really want to achieve with this? Because and we've got another film to show in a minute, but it's an extraordinary spectacle, and it is going to be an extraordinary spectacle when it's actually erected in New York. But what do you want to achieve apart from awareness? Is it just awareness?
It's awareness and debate. And I mean, we did a conference in New York at the Public Library about 3 weeks ago.
With David Miliband.
With David Miliband and Mark Thompson from the New York Times, and Fatuma, who's like one of the star refugees in my project, was there, and she started talking, and I just saw that everyone in the audience was suddenly spellbound. And it's about giving people a platform to tell their stories, to interact with people who are othered by society, and to see the similarities are more important than the differences between people. So I think... What was your question again?
The ultimate point of the project.
Yeah, the ultimate point is to raise awareness and to raise money as well. So there's the artwork itself is completely non-profit. I have started a charity which owns the artwork. We'll sell the artwork to someone who will keep it going around the world. The idea is it's a nomadic artwork, and it's going to go to different cities after New York and different non-Western countries too. So it's a kind of social sculpture, as well as the two cubes. Everyone who gives a bit of blood also tells their story, and those stories turn up in the place where the sculpture is shown on moving image billboards. So you repopulate the city with the people, virtually, with the people who have given their blood. And maybe that's what we should look at now, is that video.
Let's see this film, and then we'll talk about it in greater detail afterwards.
I feel this is the opportunity for us to unite as a species.
I just want to live peaceful with my child here. I want to help my child to see him make everything he like.
It's hard to move to a country that you're not so familiar with, but have to basically adapt and adjust to the culture.
I was in a playground with my sister, and the bomb take my brother.
I saw videos of people who I know being throwing from high buildings.
They just kill people for no reason.
I got thrown in prison and I got tortured.
When you drive your car next to a tank, this is not a normal life.
The road was like a very big black hole.
I was not aware that our parents were sending us away literally forever.
We landed in the prison.
We waited 3 days and 3 nights in the jungle for the boat to arrive. Water, food, everything ran out.
It was stormy and it capsized our boats.
When my boat started sinking, I freaked out myself and I was like, am I going to be one of them? Am I going to be a number?
And I remember, asking God, I don't want to die here, not in the middle of the sea, not now.
My blood and your blood.
It's the same.
My heart was breaking because the minute I looked at their faces, I saw the faces of my family. My grandpa Max and my grandma Celia, who fled the pogroms in Eastern Europe.
We came from bad situation. We didn't decide it. The bad situation come to us.
Imagine living without your family, where you know nobody. You don't know the language, nothing.
Understanding just how difficult that is, that it's far more difficult for them to join a new culture than it is for a culture to accept refugees.
I still have that memory of my family in front of the house saying goodbye to me.
This is a pain that is unimaginable.
My blood and refugee blood is the same.
If America had closed its doors to the Irish during the famine 150 years ago, I wonder what would have been our fate.
There are some things that are actually basic human rights that should be provided to everyone. And a place that is safe is the most fundamental of those human rights.
The first time I heard about the project, I became so excited.
It was horrific to think about blood even. Till now, till I heard about the project, I thought, no, blood can help also. I shouldn't be afraid of blood.
The idea of giving blood is very poignant and meaningful.
To give your own blood, your lifeblood, it's in a sense culture blind and colorblind.
In fact, 99% or more of our DNA is essentially identical.
It's empowering. You realize something together, and it can change the world.
My blood and refugee blood is the same.
Under the skin, we're the same.
Can you tell us how it works? So you identify people to give blood, they lobby to give blood, they pay to give blood. How does it work, Mark?
Well, I mean, you can go to the website, bloodcube.org. You can go there, you can register to give blood or to give money. If you're a member of the public, you'll be in a ballot to be in it. If you're a refugee, we'll be approaching refugees through refugee organisations, which is what we've done, and through other refugees who are part of the project. What was interesting is the idea that, to ask a refugee to give blood, is that like taking from someone who's basically got nothing? And it turned out, I went to Berlin and got a whole load of sort of leaders from different groups of refugees together, and we had a sort of half-day talk about it, and the consensus was pretty immediately that actually giving blood was an incredibly empowering thing, because when you have nothing, you're not allowed to work, you're not allowed to give blood medically, you're not allowed to do anything, you're told that you have no power, and then suddenly you're able to help someone. And as we all know, helping someone makes you feel better about yourself, makes you feel engaged with the world, gives you a sense of satisfaction. So it's an incredibly strong and powerful, pure thing. And, no one's blood is better than anyone else's. I think that's the other thing. It's about how we value people in society. And that's one of the reasons that I wanted to get very famous people involved as well, is you take someone who's a refugee who's so undervalued, they're not even allowed into a country. And then you take some of the most famous people in the world, and you put them together and you say, no, these people are equal. They're both human beings, they're the same. And you have them speaking together, you have them on a platform together. And I think that's a very powerful thing as well. So, I approached people who are well known and asked them to be in it, and they all said yes. So it just seems to be a thing that people have captured people's imagination, and they're happy to be involved, and it feels like a social movement as well as an artwork in some way.
A lot of your work, most of your work, in fact, is quite transgressive in a positive way. But we live in a time where art has become something of a commodity. In fact, driven by social media, there seem to be more artists now in the world than there ever were before. But how is the fact that art is becoming a commodity changing how you work?
Well, I mean, I make artworks that do sell as commodities as well. I mean, I make sculptures and paintings that people buy. But I think that as the world gets more commodified, it's more important to remember the real power of art, which is to do things that are important, socially important and historically important, and not to care about the financial side of it. I mean, to care about raising money and also that thing of trying to, make an artwork about a subject, about a group of people, and also make the financial side of that help those people too. So all the money that we make, which we think will make 30 million over the tour of the sculpture.
How long is the tour?
I mean, that's for the first 3 or 4 years.
Right.
Will go to refugee causes. Half will go to the IRC, which is the world's biggest refugee charity, and the other half will go to smaller refugee organisations. And then, people, when you go and see the thing, you'll be able to just get your credit card and give $1. So there's every level where we're monetizing it for the charity, and we're using social media, and because we have famous people involved as well, that helps. It's kind of it's a bit like judo. You're taking the strengths of what social media is. People love to look at famous people, and then if you get those people to say, "Hey, look at this is really interesting," then I think you can use that strength to a higher for a higher reason in a way.
Does this illustrate the fact that that we live in a period where governments have become so dysfunctional and so myopic that something like this is necessary?
Well, I mean, I definitely agree with you. We're living in a weird time, and governments are like a disaster. But I think that in times of change and shift in tectonic plates, which is what's happening now, there's it's an amazing opportunity as well to make work about that time. And I think that we're changing so quickly and so much that I think art has to be involved in that change too. And even just the idea of diversity, which is incredibly important now, it's just already there. You don't have to do anything. Just there is such a diverse group of people who are the refugees and who are the non-refugees, and they're all coming together to say we're the same, or we're equal, or we're both all human. So, and I think you need the viscerality of this shock of, 2 tons of blood on the street. That's what you hit someone first with that. And they may react badly, they may react well, they may be like, oh, how disgusting, or they may be wow. And then it's difficult to get rid of that out of your head. And what happens is over time you start to think about it, and as you ruminate it, hopefully, you start to think about all the implications of it. It's the idea of making something incredibly simple that is packed with complexity, in the same way that the cubes are giant DNA libraries of all the people and all their ancestors and all their migration patterns are in these blocks. You send those 2 blocks to space to an alien culture, and they could, by sequencing all the DNA, find out a lot about this planet. So they're kind of like arcs as well, in a way. They have all these people's history in it as well, which is why their libraries, in front of the New York Public Library, seem like a very appropriate place to put it.
Why there? It's interesting, because you could have picked more obvious places.
Yeah, I didn't want it to be an art museum, and I wanted it to be in a public place. And there's something very dramatic about that frontage that I liked. It's in 42nd Street and 5th Avenue, so it's right in the heart of where people go to work in New York and go to Grand Central, and there's millions of people passing by. The library itself is an amazing place. It's actually, I think, 30 libraries, it's not one. And they do a lot of work with refugees, and anyone can go in there and read and study. So there's a kind of openness there, which is good. And they're going to run an amazing education program with us. And so we're running lots of programs and talks with the whole thing as well.
Now, you're no longer an angry young man.
Which bit?
And the older you get, the older one gets, you start thinking about legacy. You've done some incredibly powerful work over the years, and you remain as political as you've always been, perhaps more political. So what is your legacy?
Well, I mean, as an artist, your legacy is your work, I suppose.
So how is that changing, though?
I just think that every time I make something, I have to think, is this really something that, I should be making? I'm much more selective about what I make, and I give it much more importance, and want to only produce things that are really great. So maybe I'm making slightly less work, but I think it's more considered perhaps, and more I want it to be the best.
What kind of responsibility do you have as an artist, and to whom?
Well, you have responsibility to yourself primarily, in the sense that when you make art, the person who's doing the first critique is you, but really I make it for the viewers, because art it only exists in people's minds. It only exists, an artwork is like a mirror that an artist puts in somewhere, and they've projected something into it, or a screen, and then the viewer gets something else from it, and it's a feedback situation. So it's for people who are alive now, but it's also for people who are going to be born in 500 years. When I go to the British Museum and I look at an ancient sculpture, there's that's in the present moment, and I'm in the present moment. I'm connected to an unknown, unnamed artist from 5,000 years ago. But art is an emotional time travel machine and an intellectual time travel machine in a really quite unique way. So it's kind of making things to send into the future as well.
Great. Thank you, Marc. Thank you for coming here and sharing that with us today. I know that you've just arrived back from New York. You're going off to Venice in about half an hour or tomorrow morning or something. But thank you for coming and talking about Our Blood. What is the website again? What's it called?
It's bloodcube.org.
Bloodcube?
No, sorry, ourblood.org.
ourblood.org.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Well, thank you for coming.
Please, come and register up.
Give a huge round of applause for Mr. Marc Quinn. Thank you.